All right, in this video, I want to share with you some really neat success stories had the past week, and just bringing up our chart here that we put together. The cause of your symptomology generally has its roots in one of these 7 variables. So I want you to think again about any symptom that you may have experienced. If you've seen some of the videos I've done on this is a little bit of a repeat, but I think it's important for people to understand this chart and the variables of how foods can stress out our nervous system. So food can either be like medicine or it can be like poison. And probably the biggest thing that we see with a lot of people is they're consuming foods that would be pro-inflammatory foods. And that generally is what stresses a person's nervous system out. So things like sugar, processed refined carbohydrates, colors and dyes can definitely stress out a person's nervous system. Wheat, dairy, gluten, corn. These are probably the biggest ones that most people will actually have some sort of adverse reaction. So there's something called an IgG response, which is a delayed immune response with certain foods. And so you could have even something like a tomato or peppers being in the nightshade family, and that could maybe exacerbate some joint pain. So the big question we always have to ask is not, is this food good or bad? The question we want to ask is this food something that has a biosignature match for my biochemistry? So again, food can either be like poison or it can be like medicine. And we have to pay attention many times to the symptoms after we eat something. If you feel lethargic, if you maybe would have like some bloat, some gas, then we know that that food probably did not agree with you. So as we get older, we're not producing the same enzymatic activity that we once did. We're not producing the same hydrochloric acid that we did when we were younger. So many times as we get older, sometimes we need digestive support. And if your digestion is compromised, then that's also something that you may need. We see a lot of people with some sort of digestive distress, and many times we'll find people that are eating foods on a regular basis that are creating an inflammatory response in their body. But a couple of really neat stories this past week that I had was we had one client that came in and his joint pain was worse this past week. And I asked him if he had done anything differently. And he said, yeah, my friend had recommended that I try this liquid supplement. So it was a joint support product. And one of the things it was a liquid turmeric supplement. And many times with these products, they've got, either fillers or binders. Sometimes they're good quality products. Sometimes they're poor quality products. But a lot of times they'll put like some sort of sweetener, even if it's a more natural sweetener. And in this particular case, the individual, his joint pain actually got worse. And it was because he was having an adverse reaction to the erythritol. So the sweetener in the product that they had put in he was actually having an adverse reaction. And so it led to constipation, and it led to a systemic inflammatory response in his body. So his joint pain actually got worse, and he was actually experiencing constipation. So when we tested him, his colon was coming up, and so we had to give him some support for his colon. And not only did he get better almost instantly with the colon support, but then of course, we just said, just because it works for a friend or a family member, or if you look at the ingredients or good ingredients, doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to work for you. And the reason is because of biochemical individuality. And then you look at all the other variables in our lives. Our foods are different, our immune challenges, the emotional stress that we're experiencing as individuals is different from friends or family members. We could have structural issues, heavy metals, chemicals, all these different variables. So we could have greater stress loads. So our body might be able to handle this stressor in isolation, but then, of course, when we have multiple stressors, then our body can't handle it anymore. We get knocked out of homeostasis, knocked out of balance, and that's when a symptom will actually manifest. And so it's very important for you to understand that cookie cutter programs aren't necessarily going to be something that's going to optimize your health. So if you guess right, there's certain things that you can do that are going to be helpful, and they might be more of a cookie cutter approach. But if you are experiencing some sort of challenge, or you really want to truly optimize your health, then you have to have a customized approach. And that's why it's so important that you just get tested on a regular basis, so you can at least get a basic protocol. And then the variables are always changing. So sometimes we have to course correct based on the stress load that your body's under. So that was an interesting one. And then I had a client that actually has struggled with anxiety over the years. And this is very interesting because a lot of times people that are prone to anxiety will have them get out in nature because that's very calming to the nervous system. And so this individual was actually walking out in the woods with his dog and had a massive anxiety attack, and I wasn't even sure he could make it back to his house. He was just really struggling, and finally had made it back, and he was just so thrown off because most of the time when he goes out in the woods, he feels very calm, feels really good. And as it turned out, when we had tested him, he was coming up with environmental toxins. And so that environmental toxin had triggered that fight or flight response. And so you can't always, have, on you maybe the necessary resources. But one of the things we will talk to people about is if you're prone to digestive distress, try and have some sort of digestive support on you. So if you're out to eat, you've got either some digestive enzymes or you've got some hydrochloric acid, something to facilitate that digestive process so you don't have any kind of negative response. And with this individual, a lot of times he would have on him some calming minerals that were very, very helpful. But you're not always going to have those things available. So one of the things that I really tell people to focus on when they're feeling more anxious is we can control our nervous system quite rapidly by focusing on how we're breathing. So one of the things is if we have a longer sustained exhale. So for instance, if you would inhale for a 4 count, pause, and then exhale 6 to 8 seconds, then we upregulate more parasympathetic activity and downregulate sympathetic activity. So what happens is you calm your nervous system, and very quickly you can rebalance or recapture that more calm nervous system. So if you're having a tough time sleeping or getting to sleep, one of the most important things you can do is do those calming breaths. So again, you inhale for a 4 count. We want to pause for about 5 to 7 seconds, and then we want to exhale for about 6 to 8 seconds. So our exhale definitely always wants to be longer than our inhale. And if that is too long, then just go 4 to 6 in terms of the ratio. Ultimately, you want to exhale for an 8 count, but it's very, very calming to the nervous system. But with this particular individual, again, he had that response to the environmental chemicals. And so we actually had to, we used many times, like a binder, you might use like an essential fatty acid or maybe even a fiber product. This particular person was testing for essential fatty acids. And so one of the things is, if a person's has a serious toxic load, then we need to bind those toxins, get them out of the system. But very interesting how these things can be triggered. And the more you know about your body, the more you can actually create some of these systems and processes, or actually try and have more tools in your tool chest, so you can get yourself out of the woods, so to speak, no pun intended here. But so again, knowledge leads to creating better systems and processes. You're more prepared. So we really try and get people to make sure they've got a little tool chest of things that they can do, whether that's your knowledge or whether that's supplements to get you through some of these tougher times. And then the other person I had came in that was having severe knee pain and really having a tough time. She was having a tough time bending her knee. Anyway, we actually did quite a bit of microcurrent around her knee. And by the time we were almost done with the session, she said, "I can't believe how much better my knee, it's almost no pain, but I've got this one little spot right here. It's still very sore, very tender." And so when I had tested her, the question I asked is, "Do you like sugar?" And she kind of gave me this sheepish grin and said, "Yeah, I like my sugar." So it was actually coming up. There was a spot that was coming up as nerve pain. So I gave her some inositol because her pancreas was actually reflexing and creating that pain in that spot. So we gave her a little bit of inositol literally in less than 2 minutes. I had her touch that spot, bend the knee a little bit where that was painful, and she didn't have any pain. She said she wouldn't have believed it if she wouldn't have experienced it herself. So sometimes we can do some really good structural work on joint pain, for instance, but sometimes that pain is from systemic inflammation, something coming on the inside that's actually reflexing and creating that joint pain. So again, we focused on the structural component by doing the microcurrent, and then she took that inositol, and literally by the end of the session, she was pretty much pain-free. It was a really neat story. So 3 very different stories. One, again, was taking a supplement that his friend had recommended, having an adverse reaction to that sweetener, that erythritol. The other one went into that panic attack because of environmental chemicals. And then the third one, stressed out pancreas from pro-inflammatory, obviously the number one pro-inflammatory, which is sugar. So there's always cause and effect. And one of the things I want you to really understand is when you're experiencing some symptom, rather than ask the question, how can I get rid of this symptom? The question we want to ask is, what's causing this symptom? Because there's lots of different things we can do to reduce the symptom. But if we're just putting, duct tape over our check engine light, we're not really getting to the root cause of what's creating the problem. So this is why testing is so important, to customize your approach, to make sure you're on a basic protocol. And then again, many times, because the variables are changing, we just have to course correct along the way. So hopefully you got something out of that. And remember, any symptom you're experiencing, looking at this chart, we got heavy metals, emotional stress, scars, it can be a structural issue, foods, immune challenges. And remember, the immune challenges, it's bacteria and viruses and parasites and yeast and fungus and mold. So lots of different things, and then chemical and electrochemicals. So again, if you're experiencing any symptom, that symptom is puzzling, there's always a variable or maybe multiple variables that are creating that symptom. So again, if you need help, call the office. Don't keep struggling with the same thing. If you know a friend or family member who continues to struggle with the same thing over and over, talk to them about, maybe looking at a more holistic approach. And just know this, we're always here to help you. We're so grateful for our amazing clients that always support us. If you have any questions, you need to set an appointment, call our office today. And until I see you, go out and make it a great day. You certainly do deserve it. Bye for now.